Well, major political parties, as you know, often run what are known as focus groups. They pay research companies to test the mood of a nation, particularly at a time like this. They find out what voters are thinking and feeling, and they use that to shape policies, win elections and messages.
And I know Australians are frustrated. I know they're sick of it. I know they're angry. And I know they want it to stop and for life to get back to where they knew it. But what we have to do now is recognise the reality of the challenge we have in front of us.
That was the Prime Minister yesterday, probably picking up on a few themes within the community. So every week we thought we'd cut out the middleman, essentially. If the Prime Minister and the government are listening to these groups, why don't we just go straight to them? Joining us live now is the Director of Redbridge Group, Simon Welsh. Simon, good to see you. I found it really interesting that the Prime Minister would use that language yesterday because it's exactly the kind of thing that we're hearing our friends say, our families say, and I imagine what focus groups are saying too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the frustration is palpable at the moment, and it's even beyond that. There's a real fear, the old troika of fear, uncertainty and doubt right now in the community as people are reevaluating things in the shape of Delta. I'm not surprised to hear that kind of language. It's certainly speaking to the emotional sort of tenor of things at the moment.
Can you give us an idea? We saw a news poll yesterday. It's not great for the Prime Minister, but an election is a long way away. Can you give us an idea of what is perhaps underpinning those numbers?
Yeah. I think that the fundamental problem is that you've got half the country or so sitting in some form of lockdown. You've got the other half now worried about going into some form of lockdown. And a lot of people are sitting there thinking, we didn't have to be here. This was a race and we've lost it. So this idea that the botched vaccine rollout has led to these or underpinned these sorts of lockdowns that we're experiencing has really set like cement. Like that has just become the foundation of every discussion we have at the moment with like this idea that we didn't have to be here. The vaccine rollout is the reason that we're here. And that's created a real competency problem for the Prime Minister particularly.
We see a lot of politics being played between the states and the federal government as well. We learned today that Anastasia Palaszczuk and her government has spent upwards of $500,000 on this kind of research. And we do see her pepper every day, her media conferences with, pointing out that the Commonwealth is actually 70% in charge of the vaccine rollout. And she's been very critical of Scott Morrison and her federal counterpart. What would the focus groups be telling her there?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So on one hand, people are saying, we're kind of over that. Get your act together, both of you, and get this thing fixed. We don't want to hear that kind of talk. But on the other hand, the states have become the real heroes in this. And I think the Prime Minister's four-step plan or the National Cabinet's four-step plan has only sort of reinforced that. So people are sort of looking at that, looking at the landscape and saying, well, all the Commonwealth needs to do is get the vaccine to the states and the states will fix the problem because it's in the states we trust sort of thing right now. So, yep, they don't want to see that politicking, but if you ask them where their hearts lay right now, it will lay with their state governments. And that's irrespective of it's Queensland, New South Wales, WA, Victoria. It's not a partisan thing, it's a state thing.
Yeah, really interesting. So it's not necessarily party political, it's a parochial state we need the Premier essentially to work, and we need it to get us out of this, whichever state you live in. So there's kind of that need for a leader to succeed in a crisis. Is that it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's tribal. Our tribes have shrunk a bit during any time of crisis. So it's tribal. It's got that whole state versus state kind of feel to it. It's certainly got that we want our leaders to succeed during times of crisis. Groups last week up in New South Wales and voters were still sticking strong with Gladys. This was in the face of that young fellow that died up there and that tragic case and the outbreak of cases still sticking fast with Gladys. But the other thing is that there's sort of this perception that the federal government has sort of vacated the premises when it comes to the managing of the outbreak. It's the states making the tough decisions. It's the state saying, we're going to put people first. Yes, we're going to lock down. The federal government was there last year with sort of JobKeeper and these sorts of things, but they've really kind of disappeared from the day-to-day reality of lockdown life, managing the pandemic.
Yeah, really interesting when it comes to that's the feedback you're getting in focus groups as well, because we have learned that the states have always had this kind of power under the Federation, but this is the first time in which they have really had to exercise it. Just before I let you go, what about incentives and vaccines? We know this was a week in which Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party floated $300 cash payments for everyone. How did that go down?
I'd say it went down tactically well, in the sense that it kept focus on the vaccine rollout issue, and tactically well in the sense that, you know, it kind of created a discussion around, well, what more could or should the government have been doing? As a policy position, it's a bit of a mess. So people are looking at it and going, well, how does that work? And interestingly, more in the last few groups that we've been doing, this idea that, well, does that set a precedent? So, you know, with all these variants coming out, we'll probably need boosters every year for the next few years. Is it going to be $7 billion every time we have to do a booster because we want to pay people? So policy a mess, tactically quite good in keeping that focus on the vaccine rollout.
And on the vaccine rollout, there's one final one. Are people focused on brands? How educated are they when it comes to vaccine brands? I mean, is AstraZeneca, has it really been taken a hit over the last couple of months, or are people not as hesitant as we're led to believe?
No, the hesitancy is still there, particularly on AstraZeneca. There is a clear sense that Pfizer is the one you want. There was a group, I think they sort of summed it up best when they said, look, if there was only AstraZeneca, I'd take it, no drama, because it is still safer than catching this, you know, this awful Delta thing that's running around. But there is an alternative. So, and you're telling me that the alternative is safer? Well, of course I'm going to take the alternative, and that makes sense, right? So, yeah, no, we've done a wonderful job of undermining that AstraZeneca brand in that sense.
Oh, that's such a shame. Well, Simon, as always, fascinating insights. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
No drama. Thanks, Laura. Have a good one.